In this update, we have everything from a widespread freeze to heavy snow, huge temperature swings, severe weather, and even a hurricane all in the next 7 days. So let's take a look at the overall satellite picture this morning. We can find ourselves with that upper level low that's pulling in all that Arctic air and wringing out its moisture with that dynamic cooling that took place yesterday with the first snowfall of the season in parts of Chicago. It had some heavy wet snow into portions of Indiana and Ohio, and that's going to be wringing out into portions of Pennsylvania and upstate New York this afternoon, as the rest of the country is going to be experiencing that colder conditions all the way down to the coast. While we look to the tropics, yes, we have another tropical system that we're going to be talking about with this Eastern Pacific blob out here. That all models indicate it looks to become our next tropical storm, if not a hurricane, in a couple of days. And then, yes, the West Coast finally gets back in the action with some much needed rain. So, yeah, this morning it's cold, folks. I mean, look at that. I mean, this is by far the coldest temperatures of the season, with single digits in portions of what the Dakotas and Minnesota. Those teens swing all the way down into portions of Nebraska, even freezing temperatures extending into Kansas and Missouri, as far south as Oklahoma this morning, with widespread 30s in the southeast, even 30s in Tennessee. But that colder air will continue to get colder even tomorrow, because we've got widespread freeze warnings in place for all these areas in purple. This is kind of rare to see for such early on in the season, but nonetheless, we've got freezing temperatures in portions of far North Texas into East Texas, all the way into Louisiana, even on the beaches of Alabama. Wow, that's some cold stuff, folks, and that's going to be, you're going to be feeling it in a big way for much of the country. But it's all compliments of this Arctic air that came directly from the Arctic. And here's this overall trajectory of this Arctic air mass. I mean, it plunged all the way south into the US, and that's the reason, along with all the teleconnections kind of lining up, that this colder air mass plunged so far and getting so cold this early on of the season. But big changes are on the way, because we've got a lot of moving parts in the next couple of days, because if we turn to the tropics, we've got a 90% chance of this developing over the coming days. If you remember correctly, we talked about Carl actually moving southbound, re-emerging out here in the Pacific. It's been a while since Carl's dissipated, but this is the overall kind of leftover DNA of Carl. And then now that's actually going to be reforming into Roseland out here in the Eastern Pacific. And a lot of guidance has this not only developing into a storm, but yet a hurricane just in a couple of days with rapid intensification. So, but all eyes turn to the north with our teleconnections and our rapid change and the flip in the overall pattern. We've got that, that west. We got our positive PNA right now that's bringing all the warmer conditions out west, but the big change is on the table in a couple of days with this massive dip in the PNA, and that brings all the colder anomalies entering parts of the west, at least for overall a good chunk of next week. So we can take a look at the overall jet stream by the time we get headed into this weekend. By Saturday, there's our storm out here in the Eastern Pacific. We've got the winds turning around in a big way. So I think by Thursday, the winds already turn around. But by the time we get into this weekend, you guys are gonna be like, where's all the cold air at? Because it's back to big time fall temperatures, if not some summertime temperatures, with that southwest wind increasing all the elevated temperatures. We could be looking at approaching 90 degrees back already in parts of Texas again with that southwest wind, while we look at this huge, powerful upper level trough with this massive dip and jet streak coming in from the northwest. That's going to pull down much colder air for the Pacific Northwest and really elevate the pattern as we get into this weekend. But you can see the massive surge in temperatures as we head into Saturday, with these well above average temperatures for a good chunk of the eastern and central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S., while the well anticipated below average temperatures finally do come back for the Pacific Northwest. So if we take a look at the overall troughs, it definitely gets interesting as we get into Sunday, right? So we've got that developing storm, if not a hurricane, by then of Roseland out here in the Eastern Pacific. This would be your Sunday time frame. We have an upper level low that's going to be hanging off the coast of California. And then we've got that powerful jet streak, right? Dipping down in the Pacific Northwest, dragging down all that colder air, bringing the rain back into Washington and Oregon and portions of Northern California, dumping the heavier snows in the mountain regions. And all this is going to kind of merge together once we get into early part of next week, setting the stage for that clash in temperatures and some severe weather, and unfortunately is going to be coming back in the picture. So if we take a look at the overall satellite picture, yeah, that stands out, right? I mean, that's a big blob out here in the East Pacific. That would be Roseland by then, of that hurricane going to be probably making impact in portions of Mexico. And there's the upper level low, dumping the heavier snows by then in portions of Montana, Wyoming, back into portions of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. And then all this merges together. So there's the rain pictures coming back on the overall surface map in portions of Washington and Oregon and Northern California, Seattle, Portland, those areas that have just missed out on all the rain for the last 3 or 4 months. It's been really dry and warm out there. Finally, this has come back. This has been delayed. It's probably about several weeks behind schedule than what you typically see. But the rains are going to be coming back with a vengeance, and they're going to be sticking around probably for the rest of the month. So, but as the cold air drags down, we've got most of this is going to be changing over into the form of snow as we get deeper into the weekend. So there's the temperatures. There's your morning lows by Sunday. So we got widespread freezes we're talking about now going into tomorrow on Wednesday. But these are low temperatures, folks, as we go into Sunday morning. Yeah, those are 70s, right? So you can see the massive change. Once that wind's turned around, it's not going to take much to really elevate these temperatures. But all eyes will turn out west as much of the below average temperature anomalies and a big time freeze starts heading out back for them, bringing all the change in weather conditions that are going to be entering the Pacific Northwest. But we're going to be talking about this huge surge because once the winds turn around from the southwest, all these dew points really start to elevate into the 60s. It's going to be really dry back behind that Arctic front. I mean, the dew points are like in the 20s this morning. That's the reason why you're going to be so cold. But as the winds turn around, those dew points really elevate. So all the drier air is going to be like more the muggier air, and those 60s extend all the way into Oklahoma, even parts of Kansas. Even the 50s extend all the way into Iowa and Minnesota. Typically, you got about 55-degree dew point to talk about, wringing out some of that moisture, and then probably talking about some severe weather as it's going to be on the table as we get into late Sunday. So let's take you through the map. So here's the surface map as we go into Sunday with all that heavier snows are going to be flying into portions of Montana, going into Wyoming, portions of Utah, back into Colorado. There's your hurricane going to be hanging off the coast of Mexico here, making impact. And all this is going to merge together. So if we look at the 500 millibar, about 17,000 feet, these winds are going to be screaming in the midsection of the country. That's 115 miles an hour, folks. That's some serious stuff as these winds are going to be really moving in the upper regions. Where's that powerful low pressure center? It's going to be hanging off the coast of California. This is going to be merging, bringing in some much needed moisture back into Texas and Oklahoma, but at the lower levels, it's going to be rotating. So there's definitely going to be some severe weather going to be highlighting over portions of Texas and Oklahoma, back into Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa, even as far north as Minnesota and Wisconsin. We could be looking at some severe storms sometime probably later Sunday, Monday, Tuesday timeframe. That's the time frame to highlight for that severe thunderstorms as all the moisture from the remnants of what will be Roseland by then with that hurricane coming in. Because we got a lot of water vapor coming back in the picture. Once those winds turn around, that'll pull in some of that moisture from the waters out there, and then complements of this hurricane. All this will be adding to this with this upper level low. So this whole area will be inundated with some heavier rains, some higher wind gusts, and some of these areas could be looking at some severe storms, if not even possible rotating storms. Could be looking at some tornadoes by then as we get into the day, probably sometime late Sunday, Monday, even extending as far into Tuesday, because there's the surface map. By the time we get into Monday, so we could be looking at some healthier rains coming back into portions of Texas, into Oklahoma, into Kansas, extending all the way into portions of Missouri, Iowa, and then to Minnesota. There's the upper level low that's going to be ringing out all the heavier snows by then over a good chunk of portions of southern Canada. That'll extend into portions of the Dakotas with this powerful upper level low, 982 millibar low pressure. So as this swings across, we could be looking at a squall line moving through as we go into Monday, heading into Tuesday, into Texas, into Oklahoma, and portions of Missouri, heading into Illinois by then, with that colder air with the 850 millibar low pressure center to the north, kind of ringing out that heavier snows on the backside of this system. So yes, as we go into Tuesday, that system should be moving out into portions of East Texas, into Louisiana, going back into Arkansas by then, as much of the colder air will be into the northern regions, with that heavier snows flying into Canada. And there's another system coming back for the Pacific Northwest, with adding those rain totals by then. So I told you, it's not going to be ending anytime soon. You're going to be adding to those totals, and you're probably going to be ending October with some pretty healthy totals up here in the rain department for the Pacific Northwest. But we do have a little bit of uncertainty in some of the extended range as we go into Wednesday, which is typically, because this would be about a week out. So most of the guidance on the European model has the ridge still building over the midsection of the country and parts of the east. But there are hints that the GFS tries to want to pull down some more Arctic air from Canada. That's highlighting a 1041 Arctic high pressure. So some ensemble member guidance on the European is actually starting to hint at this. This is the extended range. So we'll have to watch this and see how this evolves in the extended range as we head towards the end of October. But we got a lot of wind to deal with this system, with this powerful upper level low. There's the hurricane down further south. All this is going to be merging together. So we could be looking at some very high wind gusts over the next 7 days for a good chunk of the upper northern regions, back into Colorado, heading into Arizona, New Mexico, and where this system's going to come across into portions of Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, into Minnesota. We could be looking at some heavier wind gusts over the next 7 days. So yes, with this system, the overall timing is a little bit of uncertain. The European model actually has this progressing a little bit faster, so it definitely brings the rains over Texas, but it's moving it too fast, and moves most of the rains out of Oklahoma into Arkansas, Louisiana, back into portions of Mississippi. The rains extend into portions of the Pacific Northwest, and most of this will be in the form of snow, but the GFS model has it a little bit slower. So all that basically means is Texas remains the same with the much needed rains, but with a slower system, it would pull the moisture back into a good chunk of Oklahoma, into parts of Kansas, into Missouri by then. So the overall timing of all this is going to be coming together by the time we come into Sunday, Monday timeframe is a little bit of uncertainty right now. But what is certain is all the rains are going to be coming back for the Pacific Northwest in a big way, and all the heavier snows as well. So we're talking some deep, heavy snow. So over the next couple of days, we're still going to be ringing out some precipitation on the form of snow, some of the heavier wet snows like you saw yesterday. We're going to be adding to some of those wetter snows into portions of Pennsylvania and upstate New York today. Some heavier snows in portions of Ontario, and then as the trough dips in, by the time we get into weekend and into early next week, we've got all those heavier snows extending with the highest snowfall totals of the season by far. And then where that upper level low is in portions of Canada, they could be looking at really heavy snow for them. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.